All right, thank you very much, Jonathan, for the kind introduction. And thank you for having me here. First allow me to introduce myself a little bit. And it is my great honor to come here to have this opportunity to visit the beautiful Western Washington University campus and give the talk and present my research to the faculties and students here, and also the audience on the internet through the Room software. And my name is Zheng. You can just call me Guang. That's maybe a lot easier for the pronunciation. And actually, I graduated from the remote sensing and the geospatial analysis lab and in the University of Washington that many years ago. And after that, I returned to China. And currently, I'm a faculty member in the School of the Geography and Oceanography Science and the International Institute for Earth System Science in the Nanjing University. And since last September, I came back to Seattle and as a visiting scholar to the University of Washington. So that's why I'm here. And I have been working on the application of remote sensing data in the forestry management for many years, especially the Lidar data. Okay, today, what I'm going to talk about is seeing forests from a three-dimensional perspective. And what are the challenges and opportunities of Lidar in forest technologies and ecology stuff? And Lidar is a light detection and a ranging technology. Is basically a remote sensing techniques. Okay, here is the content of my talk today. And first, I will talk a little bit about the background information. Why are we doing this kind of research? And what are the scientific questions we're trying to answer? The second component, I'm going to show you what are the opportunities and the challenges of the Lidar in forestry. And that is, how are we going to use the Lidar in forestry? And then the final component, I've introduced a summer workshop and happening here in Pacific Northwest, and co-organized by the University of Washington and my university, to all of the undergraduate students here. Okay, let's get started. And at the very beginning of my talk, and I will give you analogical examples, trying to set up the big picture of my research. Let's imagine a sociologist trying to investigate the differences and behind reasons of the driving factors of the social behaviors for a group of people who are standing in the public squares. And what are they going to do? What's the sociologist trying to do? Any guess? Any comments? What kind of information they are trying to collect? I guess the first step, they will collect the very basic and the fundamental and the physical information. Doesn't work. Okay, here we go. And the very basic physical information, including the names and the weight and the height and all of those information. Obviously, this information is not good enough to explain the differences between the social behaviors, because the health condition can affect the social behaviors, right? For example, not all of us in this room want to try the roller coaster in the Disneyland, right? At least I don't want to try. So that means the health condition will affect the social behaviors. Okay, the next step, the sociologist might collect some more information about the health condition of the peoples, including such as heartbeat rate and blood pressure problems, right? And if we really want to know the behind reasons of all of these health conditions, we might come to look at the third dimensions. That is the energetic dimensions. What kind of food you are eating every day? Do you have any food preference? All those kind of information, right? So these are the three very important components for the sociologist trying to understand better the differences between the social behaviors, right? Okay, let's get back to the point. We're talking the forestry today. What if we replace all of the individual persons here by individual trees? Okay, similar to the sociologist, for us, the forest scientists, they also want to investigate the differences behind the reasons and the driving factors of the social behaviors individual trees. right? But they also want to collect some very fundamental informations. In forestry, we just call that one is forest structure information. Similar to the persons, we need to know the height, tree height, and weight. For trees, that's just talking about the biomass. How much organic matter do you have for each individual trees? And also the tree species, all those very, very fundamental information. Okay, we definitely also want to monitor the health condition of the trees. So by observing some of the physiological processes, such as the photosynthesis, respirations. And if we really want to know the behind the reason of these physiological processes, we also want to talk about the food system for the trees. By seeing the food, because most of the food and energy for the trees coming from where? From the solar radiations, right? So that's a very fundamental and important aspect of the forestry ecologies. And actually, really the scientific question we are trying to answer are, why do we need to care about the three different components? And what are the relationships between these three components? Okay, I should stand closer to the. Okay, what are the relationships between the three different components? That's the scientific question we are trying to answer. Okay. And in the following section, I will tell you three stories, trying to elaborate the importance of the forest structure and the relationships between the three different components. Okay, the first one I'm going to show you what's the relationship between the forest structure and the wildfire. But definitely for sure, the wildfire will burn the forest and change the forest structures. But how the structure affects the wildfire? Because we know the forest have the vertical structures. They have the overstory and understory. That can divide the forest fields into the three different layers: canopy field, ladder field, and surface field. And also the fields, the characteristics can determine the fire types. Is it a ground fire, or is it a canopy fire? And also the field characteristics can determine the fire behaviors, such as the duration and severities. More importantly, the canopy bunk densities can determine the spread speed of the crown fire. All of those information help us to determine whether we needed a fire suppression and prescribed fire, the fire management stuff. Okay, the next story, I'm going to show you what's the connections between the forest structure and the salmon habitat. We all know the salmon fishes want to live clean and cold water with a lot of oxygen. But the most important thing is they want to have the appropriate water temperatures. The only way to keep the water temperature is just we can maintain the well structure of riparian forest. Because the shadows casted by the riparian forest, they can help lower the water surface temperature. But what's the effects for salmon to forest structure? In the upper right, I just read a story published in a local newspaper in Alaska. That's just undergrad students. She's just throwing away the dead fishes, the salmon carcasses, to the one river bank. And during the past 20 years, there are studies showing the accumulation of the nutrients provided by the salmon carcasses and speed up the tree growth and make the trees grow stronger compared with the other side of the river bank. So the next story I'm going to show you the relationship between the forest structure and the carbon sequestration. By seeing the forest structure here, I mean the leaf area index. It's basically a parameter just showing you how many leaves of the forest canopy has. Okay, because we know the leaves are the places for the photosynthesis process. Basically, the more leaves you have, the more carbon you can absorb by the forest ecosystem, right? Okay, and here we come to the triangle stuff. We already mentioned the physiological dimension and the physical dimension. are the energetic dimensions. So that's talking about the three cornerstones of the forest ecologies. And the physiological is just a physiological process. Energetic is just a solar radiation. And for the physical one, just a canopy structures. Actually, we should study this triangle stuff as a whole from the systematic perspective. We cannot separate one stuff from the other stuff. Okay. And actually, in reality, all of the trees on the forest stand, they have a very obvious the multiple layer structures. If we use a conventional remote sensing, it's just the optical remote sensing, something like the images you see from the Google Earth. And that just receive a mixed signals from all different parts of the forest stand. It can only provide you with a two-dimensional, either the multispectral or hyperspectral images. Obviously, it's not good enough to study the forest three-dimensional structure based on use this kind of information. Okay, if you know anything about the remote sensing, usually the scientists use three different parameters to describe the attributes of remotely sensed data. The first one is spatial resolution, which means how fine or the grid size you can see from the sky. The second one is the temporal resolution, as how often you can revisit the forest plot from the satellite. And third one is spectral resolution. And what's the range you can see from the sensors of the electromagnetic waves? Is a visible one or non-visible ones? And usually we have the specific sensors designed for each purposes. But actually that's still not good enough. Because like I mentioned earlier, we want to study the three-dimensional structure of forest stand. So one missing part is the angle. And if we see the same target object from the different angles, we definitely can obtain more information about the forest structures. So that's the opportunity for the Lidar, the light detection and ranging technology. It's just based on the time of flight. For example, I use a controller here in my hand. I can emit the laser pulse. And actually for the Lidar system, it just emitted the signals and the heated object come back to the sensor. I can record the travel time of the light. And based on the speed, we can calculate the distance. So that's the basic theoretical foundation of the Lidar system. And it can directly give you three-dimensional information. Okay, what's exactly the Lidar data looks like? In this slide, I'm going to show you, it really depends on the height of the platform I can put on the sensor, and we can get the spaceborne Lidar. That's just a video from the GLI system. They developed by the NASA. And we can put on the airplane, we can put on the tripod, or we can put on the Zheng platform, or even just a handheld, or a car-mounted system. Or you can just walk in the forest with the sensor together, use a backpack. So it really depends on your application purposes. You can select any system you want. But all of the data collected can store in two different forms. One is a full waveform. We can simply see it's just like a curve. Or the point cloud data set. We can see it's just a point. Then we can definitely do the data conversions between the curves to the points, or from the points to the curves. Okay, here's just an example. We collected the Zheng-based Lidar data for our campus in Nanjing University in China. And actually, this point cloud data can be colored either by height, that's the upper left one, or by the RGB values. We can get the true color point cloud data set. Actually, what we have done is just copy the real world into the computers. Once we have this data set, you can do a lot of analysis about the spatial distribution pattern and the roughness of the skyline surface conditions, all of those kind of scientific questions. Okay, this slide, this video just show you how the TLS data, terrestrial laser scanning data looks like. And what we did just to bring the tripod and the scanner, go to the forest and set up in the different location. We collect the data and stick them all together and create a very comprehensive point cloud data set. We can clearly see from this data all of the tree branches or even the leaves. So this data set gives us a lot of the opportunities and the potentials. We can explore the three-dimensional structure of the forest stand. Okay, we now know the Lidar is a very powerful tool. And we also know the triangle stuff for the forest ecologies. That's the three cornerstones of the forest ecologies. The next question is, how are we going to use the Lidar to solve this problem? Okay, let's look at the first one, the structure. And to process the data, we have successfully developed some of the methodologies. The first one is a point cloud slicing. And the second one is, I just call it the 3S algorithms. It's basically talking about the first one is segmentation. You just delineate the tree crowns for individual trees. And the second one is stratifications. We know the forest have the vertical structures. We want to separate which part is overstory, which part is understories, right? And the third one is a separation. And basically, we're trying to classify the green points and the non-green parts based on the point cloud data set. That's talking about the 3S algorithms. Okay, let's look at the first opportunity that we have. And how are we going to use the Lidar data to retrieve the forest structural parameters? I just put all of the publication record here, listed here, just in case some of you are very interested in the details. Due to the time limit, I'm not going to get into the technical stuff. And actually, during the past decades, so many scientists have successfully developed the various different methodologies trying to estimate the structural parameters. If we sort out all of the parameters here, we can get this graph. In the left side, that's just the green colors. We call it the forest inventory parameters, and including the diameter and the breast height, and the crown volume, and crown size, or even the crown base height. Actually, all of those parameters can go for biomass estimation. But the other side is just a blue one. I just call it biophysical parameters. All of those parameters related to the physiological process, such as photosynthesis, and especially for the leaf year index. Now, literally, it just gives you an idea how many leaves we have for this forest canopies. And all right, and this slide is talking about the point cloud slicing. Basically, once you have so many millions of thousands of points, what are you going to do? And you can use this point cloud slicing. You can slice the point using the horizontal ways, vertical ways, or directional ways, or even you can do the radial hemispherical slicing. And what you can get is just how many gaps in the forest canopies and how large are the gaps, because that size determines how much light can penetrate through the canopies, right? And based on those information, we can estimate the leaf year index, how many leaves you have. Okay, let's look at the opportunities and challenges. Next one is how to stratify the vertical structure from the point cloud data set. Okay, this video is just showing the results, the tree crown segmentation results. This is what we did in the Washington Park Arboretum. It's right next to the UW, the Seattle campus, because we know we have a very nice arboretum in this campus, right? Maybe some of you are trying to set up a project, you can do this kind of stuff. And this different color here represent different trees. Once we have this data set, we can extract every individual tree point. Based on that, we can estimate the tree height, crown size, crown volume, because Once we have this data, it's very easily you can count how many trees you have. And more importantly, it can help you to determine the spatial distribution pattern of the trees in the whole arboretum. Is it a regular distribution pattern or a random or a clumped ones, right? That's very important for the understanding the spectral response of the optical remote sensing. Okay, based on the tree crown segmentation, we can do the stratification. And we can set up some of the specific height threshold. And you can see here, all of the green points represent the trees whose heights larger are higher than the 50 meters. But for the yellow ones, it's just ranging from the 5 meters to the 50 meters. And all the red points have the lower than 5 meters. So that's talking about the stratification of the forest vertical structures. Okay, the next opportunity we have here is, like I mentioned, we only care about the leaves. But when you collect the data, you don't know which point coming back from the leaves. And so that's something we need to figure out. This video shows you the TLS data, the terrestrial laser scanning. You already have a very dense point cloud data set. We classify all of the points into 3 different categories. The red points, just the ground. But for the blue ones, just the stems and the branches. And the green ones, just the leaves and the flowers. Actually, the theoretical foundation of this algorithm is just based on the spatial distribution patterns of the points in a local areas. For example, all of the stems and the branches, they usually have linear features in a local region, right? But for the ground surface, they have the surface features. As for the leaves, they have the random distribution patterns. So that's the theoretical foundation. We developed a pattern recognition-based algorithm to do this classification. And we apply the similar method to the ALS data. And we can clearly see here, there are not too many in the blue points. That's just because of the top-down scanning of the ALS systems. They cannot really see the stems and branches, right? Okay, now we already know how we use the Lidar to characterize the forest structures. Let's move to the second point. And the other cornerstone we have is just the food system, solar radiations. The next opportunity we have, what do we have known right now? The Lidar only can capture the 3-dimensional geometric information, right? There's no too much relationship with the radiation. How can we do that? Actually, we use some additional instrument here. And in the lower right corner, you can see the 2 sensors. That's just the quantum sensors. We put the 2 different sensors in the forest. One is above the canopies. That's just to collect all of the reference values for the radiation from the sky, including the diffuse light and the direct light. And put all of the other PAR quantum sensors. The PAR stands for the photosynthetic active radiation. That's basically talking about how much the light, the portion of the light can be utilized by the leaves. That's PAR. And the quantum sensors I put in the different location of the trees at the different heights. That's just a recorded real measurements of the solar radiation reached to that point. That serves as a validation purposes. And this is the results that we got for the TLS data. And based on the structure information characterized by the Lidar data, we based on the measurements above the canopies, and we developed a numeric method trying to characterize the attenuation, how much light can be intercepted by the forest canopies during the path of the incoming solar radiation penetrates through the forest canopies. So that's what we got. This is just the PAR spatial temporal distribution pattern from the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with a 1-hour time step. And basically what you can get from this results, any point, any time, any PAR values, right? We also apply this method This is just an example from the vertical profile. We extracted from the light transect in that plot. You can clearly see all of the gradient values along the tree height, and also the temporal variation. We also apply the similar methods in larger scales. This is a Pacific watershed, and in the Oregon state, we calculated the PAR spatial temporal variation distribution patterns. And what's the purpose of this kind of data? Are there any usage? Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, the salmon fishes like a very cold, appropriate water surface temperature. Once we have this data set, we know which part we need to maintain or plant some trees to maintain the riparian forest structures, right? Or we can just do some of the selective loggings to make the water warmer. So that's something we can do based on this result. Okay, let's move to the third cornerstone, the physiological process. Because we know the photosynthesis is very important. And for the leaves, some of the leaves can be illuminated by the sunlight, and the others will not. And the reason why we care about the sunlit and the shaded leaves, just because they have the different rates for the photosynthesis process. So based on the Lidar, the three-dimensional information characterized by the Lidar data, we can get the left image results. There's a segmentation, stratification, or the separation. And based on those structure information, because this is a real three-dimensional structure, we can do the simulation for during the sun daily course for a specific time spot, and the sun has a very specific incoming angles. And so we can simulate how much leaves can be illuminated at these conditions. So this is a good example to show you and what's the proportions of the sunlit leaves and the shaded leaves we can get at a very specific time spot, because we can get the azimuthal angle and the zenith angle for the sun. And then we can do the simulations. So based on these results, we can further simulate, okay, how much the photosynthesis can go on. And finally, we can answer how much carbon you can absorb by this forest stand. Okay, this is the results for the spatial temporal variations of the sunlit and the shaded components from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and the temporal variations. Okay, and up to now, I'm trying to wrap up my academic components of my talk today. And the next component, I'm going to introduce the summer workshop. And it's just happened only once in 2019. And we bring the 15 students from the Nanjing universities from China. Actually, Jonathan is also the instructor for that workshop. And actually, the good news is we decided to continue this year. And we already got the funding from the Nanjing University and the University of Washington. So this workshop, the topic is just the implication of the climate change on the Pacific Northwest. And I hope we can expand the collaborations between the UW and Nanjing University. Maybe in the future, the Western Washington University, maybe we can try out bigger groups and including some of the students from here and trying to organize this workshop. And actually, this workshop happened in the Washington state, co-organized by the UW and Nanjing universities. And so we will have the 3 research stations. One is in the UW Seattle campus. The second one is UW's Pack Forest. It's near to the Mountain Rainier. It's field research stations owned by the UW. So the third one is UW's Olympia National Resources Center. It's located in the city of Forks in the Olympia Peninsula. And that's a 3 research station we're gonna use during the whole trip. As shown in the right pictures, we designed 4 different field trip routes. And you can see from the different colors. And we will see at least 5 different types of the ecosystem. including the glaciers, volcanoes, rainforest, and wetland, and forest ecosystem. And during the whole trip, at least 6 academic lectures will be given by the professors and the scientists from the University of Washington and the Nanjing universities. And last time we had at least 7 different the data collections in the field, such as the Lidar, I'm going to show you later, and also the thermal images, remote sensing images. And we will have more than 20 members for the whole groups, and we can travel 1,200 meters last time during the 10 days. Thanks for Jonathan. Took this very nice drone video. This is the very first day we arrived in the Pack Forest Station, right? In 2019. And we got 15 students from Nanjing universities. They all come from the different background. And they are from the physical geography department and geology department, environmental science, and also atmospheric remote sensing stuff. So we mixed them together and divided into the 3 different groups, and including the human geography groups, ecology groups, and the geology groups. And each group, they will have specific scientific question they're trying to explore during the whole trip. Okay, this is just an example, the data, thanks for Jonathan. Jonathan, you can see the pictures. Jonathan takes a backpack LiDAR and walk in the field and collect all of the 3-dimensional point cloud data set. And actually, we also collect the thermal images here, and we're trying to match it together. And we can ask a lot of the information questions and trying to combine those 2 different kind of informations together. And we also have a scientist from UW. She's working on the wetland stuff, using the LiDAR to characterize the structure information, using the thermal images to characterize the water temperature, surface temperature, to explore the dynamic change of the wetland. So yeah, that's the picture showing just we have a lecture in the field, and Jonathan taking the backpack LiDARs. And I try to wrap up my talk by acknowledging some of the funding agencies, source, and my collaborator, both in the United States and China. And one thing I want to mention here is just in the lower right, that's the institute and school I'm at right now, is the International Institute for Earth System Science. Our research falls in 3 different categories. The first one is atmospheric remote sensing. The second one is a quantitative remote sensing. That's the part I'm belonging to. And the third one is global change. And the last one, I'm gonna bring up an advertisement. And our university, my university right now is trying to invite some of the top scholars and researchers for some of the vacancies, job vacancies. If you want to know more about the information, you can go to the website or scan the QR code at the bottom. Yeah, thank you for your attention. I'll take your questions. Yeah.
Like the LiDAR back react when there are moving things in the forest, like animals or people?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. The backpack LiDAR, they don't use the GPS at all. They use the SLAM technology. They can walking, moving, and the mapping. So that's technology. If you use you happen to some of the animals and it just come across, and that's we just consider that as a noise point, and we used to remove that point. And especially you are trying to explore the forest structure information. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Adding to that, did that ever come into play if you were trying to take data from a forest during a windy day, like while the canopy is moving a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, it's very. Oh, and the question is when, especially in the windy days, and how you're going to use the LiDAR to collect the data. It really depends on what kind of sensor you use. Are you using the TLS or the ALS or even the backpack? Because the different systems, they have the different scanning speed. And once very interesting study I did when I was a PhD student here, we take the TS data system to the field. We collect the data every hour through the whole days. We're trying to capture the spatial replacement of the leaves. But it's just because we use too old the TS systems, its scanning speed is so low, so slow, and you cannot really capture the movements of the leaves. But now I think, for example, the photo system that Jonathan is using right now is much faster. Yeah, it really depends on the different sensor you use. Okay, yeah.
Can similar techniques be applied to marine environments to create like 3D renders of like bathymetry maps and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question actually. And that's something I'm missing right now. What the LiDAR system I'm introducing right now today is only one single wavelength. For example, a green band or near infrared band is just one single wavelength. But now what I know is just they have the two different bands, the wavelength bands. They can hit it because they have the different wavelengths. They have the different abilities to penetrate through the waters. So that's they use two wavelengths, the dual bands. LiDAR system, they can measure the depth, the water depth, or even the topography variation underwater. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So once you created a 3D model, can you also transfer it to a virtual reality?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Once we created the three-dimensional structure models, can you convert to the virtual model? Is that your question?
Reality that people can set down the virtual reality glasses.
Oh, okay, I see. And convert to the virtual reality VR things, right? You use the glasses, you can manipulate through the whole things, right? Yeah, exactly. And one thing is just you can create the three-dimensional model as a force stand. You can do the three-dimensional printing, 3D printing, and you can print the whole trees, and with the real structures. And if you put it like the example I show you, we took the drone-based LiDAR, fly through the campus. We created the three-dimensional data. What we did just to copy the real world to the computer systems. And you can use the software to do the navigation and create some of the routes. Maybe some of the visitors to our campus, they can navigate through the whole campus. Yeah, go ahead.
Are the 3D models that you, or the 3D renders that you created available online to look at anywhere that's like accessible?
Yeah, that really depends on the size of the data, because that will be consuming a lot of the speed, internet speed. Because when you have 100,000 gigabytes of data, and it's very easy, you can collect those size of data from the LiDAR actually. So I know they have some of the system, they call CESIUM, CESIUM. That's a platform, web-based tools. You can publish your LiDAR data, and maybe this building or this campus, part of this campus, and they can view online from anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, someone online was wondering if you could quantify the carbon sequestration capacity of a defined area or stand of a forest using LiDAR.
Yeah, just basically how do we characterize the carbon sequestration capacities using the LiDAR data? Because we know the LiDAR data only provided the three-dimensional structures, because that's very important. Like I mentioned, the leaf year index. And you can estimate the three-dimensional leaf year index spatial distribution patterns. And after that, you should combine the methods, those results, to some of the process-based modeling stuff. Because those process-based modeling, they have the very detailed the scripts is talking about the photosynthesis process, respirations, and the evapotranspiration. That's basically talking about the water and the carbon cycles, because that's a carbon process. So what we got from the LiDAR is just the input parameters, trying to drive this process-based model to do the pixel by pixel or the voxel by voxel. That's a three-dimensional stuff. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question from, yeah. Another comments and the question? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. That's just because, for example, if we fly the LiDAR through the Washington Lake Washington, most probably you will get the black holes because all the laser just like reflect. It doesn't come back to the sensors. Yeah, it has a major reflections. Yeah, right now, the major use of LiDAR is just do the surveying for the construction stuff. And the other one is for the forest structures. Yeah, because they have the advantage they can directly capture the three-dimensional information. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, someone else wanted to know where they could potentially learn more about the technology that creates the images that you get from the LiDAR data.
Where is the?
Where they could learn more about the technology you use.
You're from the courses or the website stuff?
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah, definitely. If you are in the Seattle areas, you definitely want to check out the Roscoe website, the remote sensing and geospatial analysis laboratory in the University of Washington. That's where I got my PhD, and Jonathan is in that lab right now too. And we have a bunch of the very expensive instrument, the toys, and different toys, and bigger toys and small toys. You can take out to the field and collect the data. Actually, can you imagine when I was a PhD student in here, I just take 200 pounds of the TRS data system, go to the field, and collect the TRS data for the whole day. There's no cell phone signals. I just sitting there, and my advisor told me, okay, maybe you can read a paper for a whole day. And sitting there and waiting the scanner because they have very slow the scanning speed. So we just sitting there and wait the scanner to scan the whole, because we wanted a very fine resolution, the data. So, but now everything gets changed. So yeah, just check the Roscoe website. I don't know exactly, I cannot repeat the website. Remote sensing and geospatial analysis laboratory. You can Google it, you can find it. Yeah.
It's teaching a LiDAR weekend class here on campus. Unfortunately, it's full this quarter, but we might be able to do it again in the future.
Sure. Can I be a guest lecturer for that course? Any other comments? And yeah, like I mentioned, the workshop here. Yeah, you're welcome to check out with maybe the Jonathan or email me or the Roscoe and Professor Monica Moscow, and because she will be the instructor from the UW and for the whole workshop, and I will be the instructor from the Nanjing universities. And you are very welcome to, we can planning something out in the future. Maybe we can invite the Western Washington University to be part of that workshop. But we should go through some of the administrative stuff first. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
As always, please feel free to come up for conversation.
Yeah.